First, please download the document. Open Kami. And on this, it is going to be especially important that you use Kami. You should always be using Kami, just to be clear. But with this, you're going to have multiple days of notes in a single document. You want them to be all in a single document. So get that open there. The other thing you need to do is, once you've done that, is click on the Pear Deck link. I will get the Pear Deck code up here in just a few moments. That code is going to remain in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to go ahead and begin. Today we begin looking at the topic of culture. And all of the images on this first screen address elements of culture. Right? From how people dress, to the type of transit they use, to architecture, religion, all of those different things, and yes, even that American cultural gym, the Kintaco Hut. All of these are parts of culture. The objectives as we begin. First, and the sooner you work on getting this distinction down, the better, because it will keep coming back to haunt you in quizzes and tests and whatnot, is the difference between culture and society. The terms are often used interchangeably. Most of the time that's okay, but here we need to be more precise. You should also, at the end of this first part, be able to explain the differences between material and non-material culture. Should be able also to discuss the concept of cultural universalism within the context of societies. And finally, should also be able to distinguish between subcultures on one hand and countercultures on the other. This is a distinction that also sometimes proves challenging, so the sooner you just kind of dedicate yourself to being able to distinguish the two, the better. So first up, what is culture? Well, to begin, what culture is not is society. Culture and society are not the same thing. Instead, we should think of society as the community sharing a common culture. To put that into different terms, the community is the people. So in this image, the community is these Bolivian girls. And the culture is what they have in common. Not all of their shared culture. We can see religion, language, cuisine, that kind of thing. But similar dress, right, including the traditional bowler hat. Okay, so what then is culture? If it's not society, culture is a system of several different components. First, it is a system of beliefs. These beliefs include rules. For example, the rule in Japan, in Japanese culture, that before you enter someone's home, you should remove your shoes. Yes, it is also, this does occasionally come up, it is also something that is sometimes required in other cultures, and even there are big differences. How many of you in your own household are required to remove your shoes when you go inside? That's okay. I was in that same boat too, Chris, growing up. When you went into my parents' house, you took off your shoes. Now in my present existence, that doesn't happen. Partly because my father-in-law is an old farm boy, and he's just not going to take off his shoes because he's not going to be inside that long. Right? He's going to come in, he's going to get something, and he's going to go back outside. Right? That's just it. Right? And the same with my kids. Plus, we've got a dog, and the dog's in and out, and the dog tracks in all kinds of stuff. So, might as well just let the shoes in too. But in Japan, it's a very consistent rule that you remove your shoes before entering a home. It also includes values. And the value in Japan might be cleanliness, right, of the home is an important value. And it is. If you're wondering why the Japanese are so particular about removing shoes, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they sit on the floor to eat. Right? They eat on tables, but also in many cases, at least in traditional Japanese homes, they sleep on the floor. They roll out a mat. I don't want you guys to get some stereotypical idea that the Japanese are somehow still peasants, just sleeping on the floor and eating their food off the floor. But because they do these things much closer to where the feet are, they want the floor to be clean. Also about practices. Right? How do you greet someone in continental Europe? And by that I mean the continent of Europe as opposed to Great Britain, which sits off of continent. Yes, right. It is the side kiss thing. Right? So you greet somebody by kissing their cheek. All right. All right. No, that's fair, right? But in Western cultures outside of continental Europe, how do you greet somebody? Handshake, at least before the pandemic, right? Shaking hands. Now it's an elbow, maybe a fist bump. I don't know if the handshake is ever going to make a comeback. I kind of hope that it does. I don't the elbow thing is weird to me, and it brings somebody farther into my bubble than a handshake. And I just don't feel, I don't think I'll ever feel cool enough to really be comfortable with a fist bump. Right? I'm just an old handshaker. I'm not a hugger either, right? I definitely will be happy if nobody decides that hugging people who aren't like your immediate family is okay. I'll be fine with that one dying. One of my aunts has been married 4 times, and this most recent guy, he's a hugger, and he's a big guy, and I don't like it. He's kind of like a younger Steven Seagal, and I don't want to hug Steven Seagal, and I don't really want to hug his uncle. All right, that's a little more about me than you needed to know. But for Jermont, I mean, you got this. These 2 images. This is Meghan Markle before she stopped wanting to have much to do with the royal family, and right, when she made public appearances in continental Europe, right, people kissed her on the cheek. I don't know how, that guy, I would not want him kissing me on the cheek. Right? Not because he's a he, but just because, he kind of looks, I'm pasty white. He looks like a zombie might be like trying to bite her cheek. But when Meghan Markle, right, greets a female in Britain, right, where we might think a kiss on the cheek would be more appropriate, right? No, it's a handshake. Right? So, these things are determined culturally, and Jermont, I would be right with you. I don't want somebody kissing me on the cheek.
Bro, I'm not taking my girl to know her up or none of that. Because how are you gonna? That's weird. Why is the dude gonna kiss the girl, but the girl has a handshake?
No. And so, to be clear, like this is. If you and Josh, right, were meeting in France, right, there would be an expectation that you guys would do a little cheek thing. Maybe not actually a kiss, but like get in close, right? And neither one of you seems to be really thrilled with that idea. You can look this up. There are some hilarious pictures of like Donald Trump doing the cheek kiss thing with it's hilarious. I'm not picking on him because he's Donald Trump. There are other American leaders that have done this, and it always looks really awkward. And it would be with me, because I just would not be real thrilled about that. All right. Language is also an important cultural practice that we often don't think about as a cultural practice at all. We think of it as part of somebody's culture, maybe, but it is a practice. And it's important because it's not just that they talk in a way different to the way we talk. There are theories, this is somewhat contested, but that language has a profound influence on how a person perceives the world. And this is called something that really sounds like it should be an episode of Star Trek. For some reason, and I'm not a Trekkie, I'm just saying, like, the first time I saw this, I was like, I don't know, is this a Star Trek thing? This is April Fool's Day, but this is legit. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
The what?
Exactly. Right? The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is the idea that language has a just fundamental influence on how people perceive the world around them. And to give you, we'll do some more work on this. I haven't yet decided how deep I want to go into it. It won't be crazy. But to give you one example, in English, how many ways do you have of referring to yourself in the first person as a pronoun? And I'm not trying to turn this into an ELA class. Yeah, me, I, right? That's in you. Yes, myself, right? And we don't have to get into the possessive forms of this. Right? In Japan, I can be watashi, right? Everybody can use that, right? Everybody can use that one, right? Ashlyn can use that one. Chris can use that one. But Chris, right, can also use boku, right? Ashlyn cannot, right? Boku is only for dudes. There's a third one, and I can't remember what that is. It's not used very often. Right, but, right, Chris, depending on the situation and how he wants to present himself, might use boku to refer to I to give it more of a masculine flair. Right? Ashlyn can't do that. Right? Ashlyn can be watashi, and that's it. Right? And this as you might imagine, can affect how someone perceives the world. Right? There are limits in how one presents oneself. Right? Chris has more options to present himself as I than Ashlyn. Right? In English, I don't have any, if I want to convey myself as more masculine, I can't do it by changing my first person pronoun. Right? Can't do it. And so that might be, there are other examples of this, is how different cultures, the language for time as a volume or a distance. All right. Now, this is our first Pear Deck activity. There are no right or wrong answers here. But now we're going to get into the difference between material and non-material culture. All right. So what elements of material culture can you see in these two images? I don't want anybody to get too carried away. We're going to limit this to 30 seconds. Elements of material culture you can see. All right. Okay, so subways, types of transportation, highway. Okay, so we'll come back to that one. Now, one of the things to be careful with, and I'm glad that several of you did this because it lets us address this right up front. People are not material culture. Right? People are people. Right? Now, people can have elements of material culture on their persons. Right? If Madison decides that she's going to get a Maori face tattoo over the weekend, I don't recommend it, Madison. But culturally, if you want to do that and assert maybe whatever Maori heritage I didn't know about, you can do that. Right? Then that tattoo would be material culture. Right? If Josh decided to take those curls and turn them into a mullet, right? The start of a mullet this weekend, right? That could be some material culture expressed there in how you've done your hair, but Josh himself will still just be people.
I need to speak with Josh.
All right, give him a mullet while you're out there.
I will. It'd probably be more bushy.
Yeah, give him that's. I leave that to your artistic interpretation. Okay. So all of those elements, yes, are material culture, but not people. Now, language, right, signs, that kind of thing, be material culture.
So if I got different answers.
No, so.
Like if I got something for my culture, like my family's culture, that would count. So like a certain outfit or a certain.
Yes. So clothing is definitely material culture, but the person, right?
Is it?
Right.
So it's like the inanimate objects.
Yes, the inanimate. Exactly. And we will get to a specific kind of definition of what those things are. But yes, it kind of can be in some ways a fine line. But yeah, so clothing, hairstyle, jewelry, ornamentation like tattoos, all of that stuff can be material culture. But the person itself, themselves would not be material culture. All right. Next up, right, also for the Pear Deck and also in 30 seconds, what elements of non-material culture can you see? And I will give you a hint, people are also not non-material culture. People are just people.
The subway. The truck.
I'll tell you, this one's going to be harder to see. Trucks would be material culture.
Traffic laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maverick, throw that one in the comment. Okay, so yeah, I mean the laws, the practice, and the law of driving on the right-hand side of the road. So the road would be material culture. The street signs themselves would also be material culture. Maybe habits about following. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I mean, when we think about that, yes, the traffic laws that we don't see, people driving on the right-hand side of the road. Maybe something about America that makes people follow really close. Right? We're all in a hurry. Right? What else? For example, what does the American automobile represent as part of our culture? What does it represent? Independence, yeah. I hop in my car, I go where I go, when I want to go there. Right?
Maybe like your economic status, like if you have a car.
Okay,
or
yeah.
the type of car you have.
Sure, so we can see the Beetle, right? No, somebody does not buy a Beetle because it is the most practical automobile. It makes a statement, right? So yeah, I mean, that can be part of it, right? The status we convey by what we own. Right? Related to independence. I know you can't see a whole lot, but based on what you can see, are all of these cars absolutely loaded with people? Maybe, but probably not. Right? I mean, so you've got lots of pickup trucks with a single person in them, right? And really, most of the time, nothing in the back at all. Right? But it's a statement not of just of independence, but we are individuals who value being individuals. So this is why, I mean, in places like this, right, in California, a high occupancy vehicle is a vehicle with two people in it. Right? So yeah, any of these things. What about this one? Most of you guys left this one alone. What kind of non-material culture is expressed in that image? Well, I guess some of you did. Some of you talked about crowded.
Yeah, the amount of people.
Yeah, right. I mean, what does that suggest about their culture?
They were in a hurry to get onto the subway.
Yeah. So I mean, also a different way of conveying that we're in a hurry, but still conveys that we're in a hurry. Justin, you think you'd be okay in that subway? You would not be okay packed cheek by jowl with a bunch of strangers? No, right? That's cultural too, right? I mean, that is an image from a subway in Japan. And if you've ever watched a video of when those doors open, I mean, for Bobby talking about a hurry, right? I mean, people will form up behind you. These are not people who work for the subway. These will be other passengers. They will put their arms out and start herding everybody into the thing, right? So it's not just that Justin's going to be packed there. Justin, how would you feel better or worse about somebody putting their hand on you to cram you into the train with other people? Worse. Yeah, that's not making it better for me either. It's like, stop touching me. Don't push me. All right, I'll get on the train when I get on the train. It's different there. Right?
Picture from like people on the outside of the train or are they inside of it?
No, they're inside. Yeah, they are packed inside that train car. Right? Having also ridden the subway in New York, there are practical reasons I wouldn't want to be packed that close with some of the people there. All right. Now, that was in Tokyo.
Well, at least their subway trains are like extremely fast.
Well, they are or aren't?
They are.
Yeah, they are. I was going to say, you will not be there for very long. I mean, yeah, they move in a hurry. And they're always on time. Right? It is considered like a matter of personal shame if the operator of one of these trains is like 15 seconds late. Right? That's not an exaggeration. It sounds like one, but it's not. Okay, so let's get down to the distinctions here for your notes. Right? Material culture includes tangibles, right? Cultural products that we can see and touch. So it's the subway car itself, right? It's the signs, it's the automobiles, it's the road. So it is those kinds of things. And I mean, you can see a lot of times other things reflected in different societies, the way they design their cars, right? The size of the cars, different types of dress. I mean, those material culture, I don't want you to think of it as something that is just superficial and shallow, but kind of the depth of it comes when we get to non-material culture. These are, of course, as you might have imagined, the intangibles. The things that we can't actually touch, right, or directly observe by looking at them. For example, the traffic jams in America reflect our individualism. We all want to go our own places, leave at our own times, and travel by ourselves, sealed up in our cars. Non-material culture also includes values. So public transit might reflect environmentalism. And in Japan, it's more of a practical thing. It's not that environmentalism has nothing to do with it, but the Tokyo area has 18 million people or something. I mean, it's incredible. And that's just the best way to move around. But especially in the United States, public transit can also be seen as something that reflects environmentalism. Right? You get on a bus with a bunch of strangers to save fuel and reduce emissions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, in America, there's so much of a difference in like culture and people. Why does it almost seem like other countries are like, how do I say it? Like they have like newer stuff than like America. It seems like America just gets like after the after effects. Everything always comes out first there and stuff like that.
Well, some of it, okay, so there are a few, like if we just take public transit for one thing, I mean, it seems like Japan has these awesome trains and Europe has these awesome trains. Some of it is just what the government spends. The government in those countries spend a ton of money on public transportation. And if you think, man, those trains look shiny and the people using them, now maybe not in Japan, but if you look at European trains, those people look nice and shiny too. Well, that's because those trains are really expensive. Right? When I was on the subway in New York and this guy got off and he was doing a dance like he had to go to the bathroom, it was like, he looks like he has to go to the bathroom. And then he started peeing while he's walking across the train stand. Right? He's able to do that because the trains here are not as expensive. Right? Yeah, they said that if you rode the subway long enough in New York, you'd get your subway story. I got mine on the very first night. That was something else. That guy did this, was wearing shorts, and I just watched it all happen. And then he went right to a trash can, rummaged around, and got something else to drink.
I watched some dude take a poop into a mop bucket one time on the subway.
It happens.
It's scary.
It happens. All right, so that's some of the difference, right? And so don't necessarily take that as like there's something wrong with America. We also have really good train networks. We just use them to move stuff instead of people.
The reason I asked that question is because everything becomes so obsolete. Like their stuff comes like stuff that we would think is new is old fast.
Okay, yeah, I don't disagree with that.
It almost seems like.
No, and some of that is you're also in the Midwest where some stuff takes longer to get here. I mean, it really does. So, and that's not putting down the Midwest. I mean, sometimes I look at some of the stuff that's just coming out, especially in terms of like fashion on the coast, and I'm like, that'd be just fine if that never reached my part of the country. I would be okay with that. Now, one of you had mentioned that driving on the right-hand side of the road was part of that non-material culture, and that is, right? I mean, that's a difference. Right? We drive on the right-hand side of the road. If you go to Britain, they drive on the left-hand side of the
Do
road.
you think that it's better, like driving on the right side?
I don't think it makes any difference. I mean, really, it seems like it should, but it's only because it's not what we're used to. Yeah, I mean, I used to drive, I mean, until the car I'm driving right now, I'd driven a manual transmission for 20 years, and the idea of shifting with my left hand would seem weird, but no, I think, I mean, it would be all right. It's just kind of a cultural difference that becomes like the source of jokes, because I mean, if you go to the Brits, they'll be like, you guys drive on the wrong hand, the wrong side of the road, and they'll talk about how their cars have the steering wheel on the proper side. Okay. And it's also about attitudes, right? So, do people accept being crammed into a packed train, or do they reject that and instead go to greater personal expense and maybe even, in some ways, less convenience to drive alone in a pickup truck?
You gotta waste that money to do that?
So, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I thought people were complaining about gas being expensive, and then when I left the school building yesterday, there were like 3 people, like 3 parents sitting outside waiting for kids to get out of practice with their cars idling. So I was like, well, maybe they've got like a cheaper source of gas I don't know about.
It's going down.
Yeah, it will. All right. Let's see. Yeah, we've got a little bit of time for this, for our exit slip. All right, we're going to focus more on elements of non-material culture. Although we will often have exercises here that require you to make connections between material and non-material culture. But what we'll wind down with today is talking about values. Values are cultural standards about different things. On the one hand, what is good? What just inherently good? What is inherently good? What is important? We can take, for example, Western and perhaps particularly American values, that democracy is a good thing. And that elections and participating in elections is important. For those of you in government class, odds are your teacher told you that voting is your civic duty, and it's something you need to do.
It's just like jury duty.
Right. Now, jury duty you do actually have to do, right? Because that's a legal obligation. You're not legally obligated to vote. And when I teach government classes, I'm not big on pushing people to vote. Right? If you don't want to vote, please don't vote. Because if you don't want to vote, chances are you don't pay attention to what's going on and the candidates, and I really don't want you making part of that decision. So I'm kind of a crank in that regard, but
I think they should go back to doing capitalism.
well, we still do that. We still do that too. All right. It's also about what's proper or just. So another way to think, how much economic inequality is acceptable? That's a value that differs widely from society to society.
Your dictatorship. I mean, I get a chance to be the president of the whole world.
Well, all you need to do is stage a coup. All right, you stage a coup that you could run the whole kit and caboodle.
How you do that?
You're going to have to be in the military, usually at a rank of colonel or lower, so that you've got some more direct contact with troops, and then you take over a country. It's a little easier to do in small, poor countries. It'd be pretty hard to do here, if we're being honest. I don't want to give you false hopes.
Alright,
Okay.
give me a good idea.
So, on the one hand, how much economic inequality do we tolerate? And if we want to change economic inequality, is it okay to take away wealth from one group in the society and give it to other people, or is it not? Very different views on that. America tends to be more acceptant of greater economic inequality and less tolerant of the idea that we take wealth from one group and give it to others. That does not have to be your individual view, but Typically in America, that's what we see. All right, we'll stop there. Get your notes uploaded. Your exit slip will be going live here in a couple of minutes. Yeah, one of my freshmen in 6th hour said, "Do you know tomorrow's April 1st?" It's like, well, I'm going to get people